Good morning. My name is George Sebastian. It's a pleasure to be here in beautiful and cold St. Petersburg. A very lovely place, good food and good hospitality and good artistic heart. We're going to be spending the next 30 minutes or so together. During this time, I'll try to give you a short appreciation about crypto, blockchain, and the risks associated with cyber security with it. I don't know in terms of how familiar or how easy it is maybe with the English language, or if I need to maybe keep a reasonable pace. So I'll try to adapt to the various members of the audience. First, a little bit about myself very fast. I'm a Portuguese-Canadian, moved to Canada almost 40 years ago and studied there. And the last 20 years I've been around the Middle East. So it is actually my first trip to Russia, so it's quite interesting. And now, the last 3 years, I've done a lot of work in Huawei, so I travel across the Middle East and Asia as well. Of course, I do work for a very large organization, so this is an educational presentation. This is nothing about any products or any services. It's purely to say that, this is educational, and I'm here to give you some useful information, and that's it. There will be no mention of any company otherwise than that. This is actually important as well. Now, every time we talk about security, it's always good and important to highlight how useful security is and how we actually approach the security. So security is really about many steps that we go towards maturity. And I remember about 20 years ago, I was visiting actually Pakistan for the first time to speak to all the bankers about cybersecurity. I visited Karachi, which is the banking capital for Pakistan. And I remember arriving at the airport and coming from Canada, my first action when I get into a car is I went like this. And then I looked and there was no seat belt. So I turned towards the driver and I said, "Where is seat belt?" And he looked at me, optional. So obviously if the seat belt is optional, then I asked him, "So not dangerous here?" He said, "Don't worry, cars we drive slowly, so no problem for accidents." So let's talk about a little bit of some of the issues with what we call cyber accidents as they apply towards blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So we'll look a little bit very briefly about some complex attacks, the maturity of the technology, the fact that people today use various kinds of wallets, sometimes in exchanges, sometimes what we call cold storage wallets. We look at malware vulnerabilities, and then I finish the presentation by giving you maybe some ideas or some tips of where to go from there. Now, why are really hackers focusing on cryptocurrency and blockchain and other technologies? If you ask any of the hackers why you hack the banks, and they will answer you very simply, that's where the money is. So at the end of the day, they're being smart, and they're obviously doing this a little bit now for profit. So the more you leverage this profit, the better it is. So how really big is this problem? So let's look at one of the famous attacks that happened in the early days of cryptocurrencies. Actually, this led to the demise of this organization. Mt. Gox was a Japanese exchange. At the time, obviously, everything was kind of new. Not everybody was so mature in the usage of technology, so definitely there was no seat belt at Mt. Gox. So they were able to actually, in hacking the company, fake bitcoins. So they were able to manufacture bitcoins that were not real, but they actually used these bitcoins to actually force the exchange to manipulate the price of Bitcoin. And by forcing the manipulation of this price, they were able to reach an online price that dropped quite dramatically. And as a result of that, they were able to walk away with millions of dollars in cash. As a result, obviously, Mt. Gox disappeared. And I think if you go on the newspapers, you'll see many stories associated with it. So one of the interesting aspects about, obviously, Bitcoin and blockchain technology is the fact that it claims to you to offer, on one side, anonymity, And the other side, it offers you security because any kind of transaction that you do on blockchain can no longer be erased. It's there for eternity. But this is actually kind of a double-edged sword, because would you want to keep your transactions in some kind of public ledger accessible for everybody to look? So obviously the people that are the bad guys, as we sometimes call them, they found Bitcoin very attractive in the early days, but they kind of forgot one thing, is that today we no longer have just Bitcoin and blockchain technology on one side. We actually have another thing called big data on the other side. And big data is the technology that allows you to analyze behavior and patterns and analyze this information in a very deep way. So when you combine the two together, you actually have very dangerous things. So although the cryptocurrency wallets are sometimes what we call pseudo-anonymous, which means that it's just a number at the end of the day, when you combine this historical data with lots of transactions, and you combine this with big data, you can actually go back in history since the beginning of time, and the people that participated in this Silk Road and these underground exchanges where you could buy drugs and all kinds of other, hire maybe somebody to assassinate somebody else, and many other things that I cannot necessarily talk about here. But you are able to actually know who did what almost then. Not only you know who did what, all this information is there and you cannot erase it for the next 10 years of lifetime. So what was designed as a security mechanism now exposed a lot of people with a lot of risk. So obviously hackers and bad guys have moved to use other blockchain technologies that limit their exposure, like Monero and many others. Now, what really makes technology today like Bitcoin and blockchain as a risk to us? Because when we talk about internet, everything is connected. Because everything is connected through some kind of IP address, your risks and exposures can really come from many areas. They can come from the exchange, they can come from your wallet, they come from the Bitcoin mining, and many other elements that I'll be showing you over the next few minutes. So sometimes you have a lot of blind spots, and you need to be able to address these blind spots in order to be able to protect yourself quite effectively. So let's look at some examples. Obviously, people were mining Bitcoin. Why are people mining Bitcoin? Because it's an easy way to make money. So today, if you invest in something like $3,000 to $4,000 of equipment, that means buying a miner, you actually recoup that money relatively quickly. By the end of 1 year, that hardware is actually paid for and it's generating pure cash. But people are actually not defending these miners very effectively. So if you do a quick scan of the internet, and you realize that there's a lot of Bitcoin miners that are there using default passwords. So on one side, they're capturing money and creating money for them, but on the other side, they're not protecting the money that they're collecting. So they're leaving their money that they have created completely exposed. So very easy to hack without too many efforts. But the matters have gotten much more complicated than that. One of the more sophisticated malwares called CodeFork it's not just about Bitcoin. It's a malware that can be used for other purposes as well, and a few countries have used that. It's a fileless malware. That means if you do an antivirus scan using any of the most popular McAfee or Kaspersky from Eugene Kaspersky, it will not necessarily find this malware because it's fileless. It's always in memory. And by being in memory, it becomes much more difficult to discover. Since this malware is attacking your computer, they say, mining is an easy way to make money. Why don't I start borrowing the computing power of all these computers connected to the internet? So they started to mine something called Monero. Monero is similar to Bitcoin, another cryptocurrency, easy to mine, and because it does not require specialized hardware, you can mine it in small chunks, and at the same time, it gives you a much higher degree of anonymity. We call this knowledge today by the name of what we refer to as cryptojacking. That means I'm going and I hijack some CPU or computing resources to actually mine Bitcoins or some altcoins. So this is one example. But what people realize is that since the money is in mining Bitcoins, let's go and hack everything that has some CPU power. So how many here have actually used free movies on the internet? By going to Pirate Bay or by going to some other site. Now, Since those sites are free, they need to monetize their usage. So what they started doing is putting little JavaScript that ran inside these websites. And since you're connected to these websites, while you're watching the movie, they're also borrowing the CPU of your workstation, sometimes powerful workstation, to also mine Bitcoins at the same time. So you're getting a free service, but you're also providing some monetization for these individuals as well. Now, this is a very simple example. Of course, the problem has gotten much worse. Many people started hijacking all kinds of browsers. People started hijacking plants. Plants meaning manufacturing plants, SCADA computers. As you know, in the internet, SCADA computers are, a lot of them, connected to the internet. And SCADA computers are very dumb by their nature, so very difficult to protect them. And most of the times, there's no firewall or anything attached to them. So now we have manufacturing plants also producing crypto coins at the same time. And this is actually an example from Russia as well. So we have some scientists that were extremely intelligent. We have a supercomputer. Why don't we use this supercomputer to mine supercoins all at the same time? So they installed the mining. Goodly enough, they got caught before they were actually able to mine a single coin, because they forgot that somebody was watching when that supercomputer was actually connected to the internet. Not only you need the power of the computer, but you also need the internet connection. So they did not go very far. What about things like cars? People have used Tesla to actually mine Bitcoins. Now, why, you say, why Tesla? Because Tesla actually offers free electricity for the drivers of the car. So if you have free electricity, you can mine for relatively cheap. By the way, one of the reasons why people have mined in very strange countries like, for example, Russia, Canada, when I mean strange in the sense that it's cold country and energy is available in a very cheap, or for example, north of China, is because of availability of very cheap energy. But people have gone beyond that. People have started now mining using mobiles. So that means if you go and install an application on your mobile and you don't necessarily know the source of this application, and especially if your phone is getting a little bit hot, there is a good chance that that phone may actually be mining some Bitcoins for somebody else or some altcoins. Actually, it's more dangerous than you think, because if the phone is left mining coins for a long period of time, the phone will actually end up being damaged because of the extreme heat that is actually being generated on the coins by the CPU power of running such a long time. But mining has got also some side effects. There is a case in which, this is from the United States, the Federal Communications Commission asked one of the miners to actually stop, because the miners was actually creating interference. These machines generate a lot of noise. They also generate electromagnetic interference. So these miners were actually interfering with the LTE signal. So for example, if you're trying to get some data or wireless connection, the miner was actually preventing the T-Mobile users to get access to their information. Now, why are so many people used or getting used to all these coins and money? Who needs this money? So we have people like, for example, North Korea. They need to finance, they're under embargo, very tough conditions. So obviously they have established a very big fund of Bitcoins. And where is most of Bitcoins actually being used? Just next door in South Korea. So they launched massive attacks against the South Korean exchanges, and they basically built a fairly large war chest as a result of these cyber attacks. We're talking here in the several million dollars. One of the interesting organizations called DAO, which is trying to create a more advanced version of a blockchain, raised a lot of money. It's like similar to the ICOs, initial coin offerings. But there's nothing worse than when you raise money and somebody comes and takes that money at the same speed that you're actually raising it. So this organization raised $150 million, but the wallet was a bit leaky, so $60 million went by the back door of this organization. And obviously they would try to get it back, and some of it was actually frozen, so to prevent it from being used for... Now, if you're into cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or altcoins, somebody's going to come looking for you. Not only they're going to come looking for you, they're going to come looking for you in an extremely active way. So a lot of scanning has been done on the internet, and we see massive people looking for coins, they're looking for wallets, they're looking for miners. They're looking for anything that is connected and has anything to do with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, because they know there's money there. So once you identify the IP address, then you can launch basically more sophisticated attacks. But sometimes it's all about the code. One of the features that is available in cryptocurrencies is what is called multi-signature wallets. So typically a signature is a PKI implementation where you have a private and public key. And the idea behind the multi-signature wallet is that you have two persons signing the same wallet so that one person cannot withdraw all the money. So one of the guys found a deficiency in this, and he tried to actually steal the money from that wallet. But he actually did it in a way that it was wrong. So he actually invalidated $400 million of money. So that means now you have $400 million of money sitting there, and nobody actually has access to that money because it's actually in limbo. It does not belong to a specific wallet, and nobody can actually retrieve it. Some people have actually even made the suggestion that we should write a special bifurcation, what we call a code fork, saying that we find a way to retrieve that money back. Now you're going to say, this is one example. No, in reality, no. We have really large amounts of cryptocurrency that sits out there that is basically lost forever. So a percentage close to maybe 10% or even higher is simply sitting around of cryptocurrencies that are no longer accessible by anybody, because either by mistake. One guy, for example, had a lot of Bitcoin in the early days. It was in his hard drive, and his hard drive ended up in a landfill. So he now realized it was multi-millionaire, but the millionaire was in the garbage can, not in his wallet. So he tried to, by many means, to go against that landfill, but the city actually prevented him from doing so. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's just a list to give you an idea that if you think the problem is getting better, the problem is actually getting worse, because the attacks started at several $1 million, and now we're no longer talking about several $1 million. We're talking about $400 million, $1 billion, and some of the latest ones actually go even beyond that. And I'll give you one example of that shortly. So we're talking things that are in the billions of dollars as the types of attacks that you get in cryptocurrency rather than otherwise. And many of it is not because some hacker is actually doing something bad. It's just that people are in a rush to launch their applications. And one of the best examples is this Japanese exchange that just a few weeks ago was offering Bitcoins for free. And one guy actually tried to cash out the entire wallet. And this is in the neighborhood of something like about $10 to $20 billion worth of Bitcoins. Of course, it got stopped just at the last minute. But we're talking about massive amounts of money. Actually, this money is larger than the GDP of many countries on the planet, just to give you an idea of the kind of size of these attacks. So, you think you're safe, but sometimes the attack might come from your blind spot, where you actually don't least expect it. And one of the reasons why is because the infrastructure on which we're running all this technology is itself very faulty. And one example is the mobile and the telephone system that you use every day. There's something known as SS7 vulnerabilities, which, for lack of a non-technical term, means the signaling system of your mobile and telephone system has got some serious flaws in it. And because it has serious flaws in it, people can take advantage of this system to actually get into other systems, not just crypto coins and wallets. They can get into your banking account, they can get into your email system, as I'll show you very shortly. So in this case, they're actually using these vulnerabilities to erase your information, erase your devices, impersonate you as an individual. So the best example is actually to show you this by a video. So it has no sound video, but at least it will show you what do I mean by that. So this is Coinbase, probably the largest exchange in the world and one of the most popular ones. You can sign in and have an account on Coinbase. It's based through normal email, could be your private email or Gmail. So once, of course, Coinbase is a fairly secure system which has a lot of KYC, know your own customer information, etc. It also uses your mobile number as a way to extra secure your information. So here you have a Google email account, you log in. So this particular hacker is able, by intercepting the SMSs that go as a multi-factor authentication to your phone, to actually get into your Bitcoin or cryptocurrency wallet. And the way they're doing that is they're basically impersonating or intercepting the SMSs that are actually coming to your mobile phone. Now, by intercepting these SMSs, that they can easily reset passwords of your email system. They can reset passwords of your crypto wallet accounts. And I guess the rest is pretty much self-explanatory. The thing important here is that this is not just as a risk to your crypto wallets. It's actually a risk to everything else that you use, including your traditional banking system as well. There's many attacks that have been rushed around the Middle East in which people have basically emptied somebody else's accounts by impersonating their mobile numbers. I will share with you the video through the organizers so you can get a chance to look at it. One of the features that is available within blockchain, especially in ICOs or initial coin offerings, is that they're based on the Ethereum platform. One of the features that the Ethereum platform introduced is the concept known as smart contracts. Actually, they're not really too much smart about them. It just means that when you have a specific address and a specific wallet and a specific environment, you can also attach a piece of code with that. And this is called a smart contract. So that means how you distribute the coins, etc., is regulated by code. And this code is obviously very useful to automate. Now, this code looks like something new, but it's been around for many years. If you use traditional databases, you may have heard something called stored procedures, which means that when you have some piece of code or of data inside that database, the code gets executed when either you view, insert, or modify, or delete any information. But because people are in a hurry to write these smart contracts, a big percentage of these smart contracts are actually full of vulnerabilities, full of holes, or they're basically miscoded. And as a result, it exposes a lot of these organizations to a lot of cyber risks. Of course, one of the recommendations that comes when you use cryptocurrencies is don't keep your money in exchanges or exchanges like Coinbase, which is a cloud-based wallet. So they say, please move it to your cold storage. Cold storage really means it's a wallet that belongs to you. So that means you have a little piece of hardware in which you store your private keys so you can actually be the only person that has access to those funds. So there's many types of these wallets, some protected by PIN codes, some protected by biometric devices and others. But these cold storage wallets are themselves vulnerable. You don't expect them to actually lead you to trouble. And one of the simple examples of these attacks is if you buy these wallets where you least expect it. You go to eBay and you buy some of these wallets. There's been a few cases where people have actually replaced the keys that are used to initialize these wallets. The best way to explain this to you is that somebody sells you something, but they keep the back door to that wallet. So that means you think you have the money and it's secure, but the people that sold you that wallet have another key that they can retrieve all the funds that are actually associated with their wallet as well. So it's not only important to have the wallet, it's also important to understand the source of this wallet and to make sure itself is secure. Since then, obviously, Nano, which is a French ledger, a French company, has also issued some software corrections to eliminate the risks associated with these crypto problems. Now, a local problem from St. Petersburg. I had to find something that had at least something to do with this town. It's sort of just interesting because sometimes the problems in the cyber world go into the real world. You know, people who make a lot of money, they like to brag about it, you know, by driving nice cars, making a lot of noise on the street. But when you make a lot of noise, bad guys come to looking for you. So this is a specific case where one guy that made lots of money in the cyber world, about $500,000, which is a lot of money. So he was bragged, so some guys come and actually beat him up, saying, okay, give us all your coins or we'll make your life very... And this is not the only case. There's been a few cases like that all over the world. So if you have money, keep things quiet, don't brag too much about it. It's also a good idea as well. Now, the problem is actually much worse than you think. Because one of the things that exists today in the internet is that even bad guys that don't have the capability to attack you by writing bad code, they don't need to write it. They go out and buy it. This is known as a vulnerability market exchange. So if I want to write a piece of bad code to actually go and steal information from your wallets, I just go and buy that code. So a vulnerability can be bought for as little as a few $100s, or sometimes as much as $500 million, $500 million or more. And these are sometimes used for what we refer to as cyber weapons. So these are some that are available on the internet. Of course, it's always better to be careful about social engineering. I give you the example about somebody bragging about themselves having too much money. But in social engineering, people are trying to actually impersonate somebody else. So a lot of people are trying to fool people into giving away their money or giving away pieces of their identity that then can easily go and create them problem. And social engineering on the internet is actually very difficult to protect, because today I can send you to a website by the name of abc.com, and you think it's abc.com, but it's not abc.com, because I replaced this A with an alternate code A. It still looks to you like an A on the screen, but I'm actually going to a completely different website. So I'm actually impersonating the image of this website so I can make it look like I'm in a real crypto exchange, and in reality, that person is completely stealing my entire, or phishing away my entire identity. But some guys even go much beyond that. There was one guy sitting in New York, and he was selling chocolates as Bitcoins. And guess what? People were buying chocolates made out of gold or wrapped in gold, and he was selling them as, yeah, this is the real Bitcoin. And guess what? People were buying it. So you don't even need to be an extremely electronic person to actually make money out of this craziness of Bitcoin. So social engineering has got all kinds of ultimate goals. Of course, there's some spokespersons for cryptocurrencies. I know John actually for quite a number of years. If you are into this, people like Eugene Kaspersky or John McAfee have been around for a number of years, and they have made a name for themselves. But John recently got into cryptocurrencies as well, and he makes all kinds of statements now and then. But people are taking advantage of his personality to go in and impersonate him, saying, oh, you send me a few coins and I'll send you more coins because I'm giving them away. Of course, this is all fake. At the end of the day, many companies and many individuals are actually falling for this kind of social engineering vulnerabilities. So, to finalize my presentation, I wanted to give you at least some ideas of the kinds of things that you can do to minimize or look at how to reduce your operational risks. It is very important to secure the information that leads to the security of the final information. So securing your email accounts is extremely important. Securing your social media. And another thing that is important is don't use the same password in one or more accounts. Have a different password, extremely complex across all your accounts, because people, once they get one of your accounts, it becomes very easy to roll over to all the others. Enable multi-factor authentication. That means not just a user ID and a password, but user ID, SMS, or other methods. Sometimes there's token tools that generate passwords at periodic intervals. Use things like biometrics, not just biometrics, but what we call multimodal biometrics. Sometimes it's fingerprint, sometimes it's iris, retina, or other capabilities. Do some security awareness training. This is very important for you to give to your own staff or the people that you deal with every day, because these are the individuals that need to be brought up to date on the latest risks. You need to feed this information on a regular basis. But I think even more important than all of the above is the last one. No matter what you do, you're going to get hacked. So whether it's today, week after. So the question is, it's like when you have an accident. So you need to know what to do when you get into an accident. Now, it's not during the accident that you're going to determine what is the actions that you need to take. It's before. So you need to do what we call incident response drills, which is the kind of things that you do to respond to a cyber attack. Who to contact, what steps to do. The steps that actually minimize your risk rather than make it worse than it was in the first place. A few years ago, I created a methodology that is agnostic to any technology to help you address cybersecurity. I started with 4 A's, and eventually I ended up with 6. Now I have more than 10 A's, but I'll give you 6, so at least it'll give you a short to take home with you. So it's kind of a methodology that it's an incremental level of maturity. So you do something called assess, which means you evaluate the risks that you have. So only when you know what is the risks that you have, you can design the proper security. So those architecting or designing the proper security. Once you know what's the proper design of the security, then you can implement it. But even more important than implementing that security is what you do every day, the administration of security. It's not the fact that you have implemented something that you actually are secure. So for example, if you have a firewall, you need to go look at the logs or the error messages that are being generated by the system. So this is the discipline of using security in an effective way every day. Now, as you go in this maturity level, what happens is you become more mature in the use of security controls, and you reduce your business risk. Let me give you this example. If I go back to my first talk, I mentioned to you about the seat belt. You probably came here today by car, but your car not only has a seat belt, that is the first level of maturity. You probably have ABS, traction control system, airbags, and many other things. So today, the security maturity and usage of your car is actually much more effective. But can you still kill yourself? Of course. If you drive your car in a reckless way, even with the new Tesla artificial intelligent smart driver, you can still manage to hurt yourself. So these 4 A's working together give you an extra level of security. So there's 2 more A's that are important. One is obviously the security awareness, always giving information about the latest threats. And the last one has to do with the incident response, which is the agility. So if you're not agile on how to respond to a cybersecurity incident, you will never be able to actually defend yourself in an effective way. So if we put that in an overall dashboard, I think if you're really serious about security, you need to have a proper set of measuring criteria and a right set of countermeasures to be able to defend yourself in an effective way. This is my short talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchain today. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be available throughout the day for any questions you may have, or maybe questions now. So I will leave it to the chair people of the organization to continue. Thank you very much.
Георгий, спасибо большое. Спасибо, очень интересная презентация. Скажите, вот сегодня огромное количество мобильных приложений появляется ежедневно. Как компания Huawei все-таки реагирует на киберриски? Либо это рекомендации лично каждому пользователю по защите, те, которые вы сейчас обозначили, либо все-таки компания Huawei особенно заботится о защите.
Либо иностранному гостю дать наушник для того, чтобы...
Да. Окей. Да. Георгий, спасибо большое. Спасибо большое, очень интересная презентация. Yes.
Okay. I will be available, so no problem. Спасибо. Thank you very much. Question.
Да.
Yes,
Я повторю сейчас, можно?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Я хочу спросить, ежедневно появляются сотни мобильных приложений. Как компания Huawei заботится собственно говоря, о тех пользователях, которые будут пользоваться телефоном и теми приложениями, которые устанавливаются на телефон? Или все-таки больше рекомендаций дается непосредственно частному
Actually, it's a very good question. I like maybe to add this, and this is actually extremely important. Huawei as an organization is primarily an engineering organization. So Huawei is, it's doing very little in the area of the applications themselves. Of course, they have a few of their applications, but Huawei is providing the hardware and the capabilities to execute those applications. Today, the Huawei phones in the area of mobile are based on the Android platform, most 99%, with a few examples now. Some laptops are actually based on Windows, but mobiles are 100% based on Android. So really, the protection of those applications has to do with the ecosystem of how you protect the Android and the Play Store, etc. So Google themselves has actually done a lot of mechanisms to reduce some of the risk. However, the risk today in Android is slightly higher than on iPhone, and there's a reason for that. Where in iPhone, the store is primarily controlled by one organization, which in this case is Apple, and they prevent a lot of other organizations from sending mobile applications, although individuals can sign if they obtain a digital signature to sign the applications to make sure that they're authentic, but eventually Apple can refuse that signature and eliminate that application. But today, if you go into the Android ecosystem, there's not just the Android Google store to get the applications. There's a lot of small sub-stores. For example, X, Y, Z company create their own. And the problem really comes when you start going into these other stores and downloading these applications without necessarily understanding the implications. Now, Google has fixed some of that problem by introducing better security capabilities within the operating system itself, allowing or making visible the permissions that those applications request from your phone. And also Google has got a new scanning mechanism that is able to scan the applications that you downloaded from the Google Store. However, there still remains a lot of holes, which means that those applications that you installed from other sources. So the only other mechanisms that you can use is you can install a third-party antivirus for your phone, and I greatly recommend. There's many of them available today. Some of them are also rootkit searching engines that actually go through your phone applications and try to identify if there's some wrong behavior taking place. There's other applications that is also worthwhile. John McAfee actually makes one of them that allows you to take the applications that are running on your phone and actually analyze the permissions that these applications are requesting from your phone. This is actually extremely important because, for example, if you install a game, why is this game asking to have access to all your contacts or access to your SMSs or access to your GPS positioning? So a lot of these companies are taking this data from your phone and obviously reselling this data to other individuals to be able to monetize your phone. So you're actually the product to these companies. So allowing them to generate profit on your behalf. And there's many other examples. I mean, one example of also a very large cyber attack was where people had installed this famous flashlight application, which is a very innocent application, only designed to take the LED on the back of your phone and use it to. But this application was actually used to launch one of the largest distributed denial of service attacks, because some of these flashlights actually had backdoors built into them. So it allowed your phone to be part of a distributed denial of service attack. Yes.
Спасибо, Юрке. Скажите, а что вы можете сказать об облачных приложениях и о перспективе хранения данных?
Well, cloud applications is a whole new area. I mean, it's been around for a number of years. Although cloud, we sometimes refer to as quite new. Cloud has been around since, you can say, from the mainframe days, because it's a centralized form of computing in which you share resources across the network. Client server was the initial days, but certainly over the last, you can say, 7 years plus, cloud has become extremely important. There's different types of cloud, private, public, hybrid. So depending on the kind of cloud that you use, meaning private is more easier to secure, but as you move to public cloud, obviously you're exposing internet addresses, etc. So you have more risks associated. So there's best practices associated with cloud approach. One of the ones that I certainly recommend you have a look at is known as the CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. Now, Cloud Security Alliance is a group of security individuals that gotten together and took many of the best practices associated with cloud computing, analyzed them, and allow you to implement some better and more mature controls, basically more mature seat belts to be able to defend yourself. One example of that, Huawei launched a public cloud, for example, with Dutch Telecom in Germany. And by using the Cloud Security Alliance controls, we introduced an over extra 1,000 controls into the cloud platform. So, Europe tends to be a little bit more, serious about security than in the US. They tend to be more organized and more, especially things like privacy. And I think some of my counterparts might talk about that in more detail later on. But certainly, Germans are very serious about security. So implementing these extra Cloud Security Alliance controls will lead to a better cloud and more safe environment. And in many cases, it's actually important. Today, people running in the cloud are actually more secure than in their own environments. Because what happens when you go to the cloud, you're conscientious about being in a shared environment. So you take extra measures. People that are in their own private environments, they take a very relaxed approach. Oh, I'm in a safe environment, therefore I don't need the same level of security. And this is a very false way of approaching security. More specific to cloud storage, there's a multitude of cloud storage systems from Google Drive to Microsoft, Dropbox, and others. A lot of these obviously have matured to introduce multi-factor authentication as one mechanism, but this is by itself not enough because you're now in a shared environment. So people have also introduced what is called encryption of those environments. So not only you're protecting the access to that information, but you're also protecting the contents as well. There's some more newer competitors to these organizations that are actually using blockchain technology. So they're actually using the blockchain as a way to protect and have access to this cloud storage as well. And if you're interested, I can share some examples of that later on as well. Thank you.
Спасибо
I
большое.
think there's
Виктор.
one question
У кого
behind.
есть еще вопросы?
Hi, thank you for the speech. One question. I was trying to resume what we were speaking about ways to hack the crypto wallet. As I understand, it's the way to find a way to your Gmail account or just mail account, to find the way to get your data about the password and your login account. And the third one, to install an application on the mobile phone and to get also the data. And the question is there any dramatic difference between hacking the bank account and the crypto wallet? If no, the second question, should the companies who try to protect the accounts deal with the crypto wallets the same they deal with bank accounts? I mean, the insurance companies, the cybersecurity companies, etc.
Your question is actually extremely valuable because when you talk about cybersecurity, the same approaches should be used whether it is for traditional banking or crypto banking. In reality, at the end of the day, 80 or 90% of the vulnerabilities are common across those two environments. Because what I was trying to highlight to you is although the blockchain technology itself is extremely secure, and although there's been a few vulnerabilities over the year, you can say it's 99% secure, not 100, because there's been a few cases where it has failed. The issue is that that environment lives in an internet environment. So any kind of potential entry mechanism renders that security null and void. So yes, you have something that is secure, but that thing that you have that is secure is living in an unsecure environment. So therefore, it is making that itself unsecure. It's the same thing of having a car with all the options of seat belt, airbag, traction control, smart driving, but you still drive in a reckless way. That means instead of looking at where you're going, you're reading a book. And of course, the car will crash into the back of the truck. This is going to ride in the crypto world. Actually, to be frank, if we look at things like, for example, blockchain technology is actually an interesting implementation of cybersecurity. It's an interesting implementation of what we call PKI, which is the concept of private and public key. What blockchain did is it took this technology and it distributed it over a very large number of computers. And the idea behind distributing this over a very large number of computers was to prevent one single computer from being attacked. But there's still the theoretical attack that if you had 51% or control of 51% of those computers, you could still create an attack regardless of all kinds of other protection mechanisms. Today is, today is less likely, but if you go back maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the highest percentage of miners were actually in China. So China, if it wanted at that time, it could have launched the 51% attack. But today, it's no longer the case because not one single country is actually looking or has the capacity to do that. But we should be careful because some of the technologies that we have today and are calling themselves blockchain, they're not 100% blockchain or not 100% distributed. And one example is Ripple. I mean, I'm not trying to single them out because they're bad or so, but they're kind of a centralized approach towards blockchain rather than a decentralized one. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that the exchanges that we have today are highly centralized, not decentralized, many points of failure. Second or third point, even more important than that, they are not as mature as the traditional banking that we have over the years, or the traditional exchanges. One example is one of the exchanges, and I will not name names, was just doing an upgrade recently. The exchange was down for more than 24 hours. How many exchanges do you see being down by more than 24 hours to do a software upgrade? Today, in the modern world of continuous IT, you should have 2 or 3 minutes of downtime, not 24 hours, because in 24 hours, the kind of price variations that could happen in the cryptocurrencies could eliminate maybe 1 year worth of profits for you as an individual. So this kind of behavior, I do not consider to be acceptable. And it's, I consider this to be bad practices, bad coding, bad operations, and I can name quite a few others in the process as well. It's about maturity at the end of the day.
А можно еще вопрос задать, или уже вышли из времени?
Спасибо большое. Я думаю, что все остальные вопросы